Hey guys, it's Lauren. So today's video is called I Want to Create, but all my energy is being spent on work. And it's about the inner turmoil that I feel finding a career as someone who is creatively inclined. So yeah, let's get started. And just as a disclaimer, everything I say in this video is based off my personal experience. So these are my chapters for today. Chapter 1, the career paths that artists have. Chapter 2, what path I chose and why. Chapter 3, how I chose my career. Chapter 4, my career crisis. Chapter 5, how I resolved my career crisis so far, and Chapter 6, conclusions and limitations. Chapter 1 is career paths that artists have, or more specifically the paths that I felt that I had when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life in undergrad. So option 1 was having a creative career, and this is just anything where you're required to be creative in your actual career. And this job is your main source of income. And so an example is being a YouTuber where you're making creative content for the internet, but this is also your main source of income. And then the second choice I thought that I had was going all in art, which means, I don't know, not really thinking that deeply about what career you want, but just kind of focusing on what you're creating. And so I see this as kind of having an unreliable source of income, but at least you get to go all in on what you love. And an example of this is Vincent van Gogh, because he relied on his brother to provide money for him so that he can do his art. And option 3 was having a non-creative income as your major source of income, where you're not really doing anything creative, but creating art is more a hobby outside of that day job that you have. And an example is Franz Kafka, because he worked at an insurance company for his day job, but his true passion was being a writer. Okay, so Chapter 2, which path I chose and why. So first I'm going to go over the paths that I didn't choose. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the creative career. And the reason why I didn't see this as a viable option was because eventually you have to pander to the kind of art that sells instead of doing something that comes from your actual soul, in my opinion. So your career is dependent on other people's opinions and your art is dependent on other people's opinions. And I felt like if I chose this, I would eventually have a negative relationship with creativity, because even though creating art was something that I loved in the beginning, if it's tied to my financial stability, I'll eventually have to pander to what other people want because I need to financially survive. So I feel like that's what prevented me from choosing this. And an example is YouTube, because if you're a full-time YouTuber, I think that eventually you would have to see what people are interested in watching, and I feel like I never want to think about my art in a financial sense in terms of what I think will sell. The second path that I didn't choose is going all in on art, and the main reason is because it's extremely high risk. You're basically gambling your entire life on the slim chance that you will make it as an artist and you can fully support yourself through the art that you're passionate about. And even though it's really common to be like, oh well, if you're passionate about it, you should just go all in on it, I feel like there's a survivorship bias of people who did do that and succeeded. But for every person who succeeded through their art, there's like a lot of other people who didn't and had to eventually pivot to the other two options. So I think the idea of the starving artists who has no money but is passionate is something that's less realistic in practice. And so the option that I did choose, and these are reasons why I chose it, is because I'm not risking my life on this chance, this small chance that I will succeed. And also my income isn't dependent on what other people judge my art to be. And the third reason that drove me to choose this is because I have a clear separation between my work and life. Like, work is work, and then my hobbies that I love are anything outside of that, instead of mixing the two like this option. And so that also means that the stuff that I create is something that I completely want, and it's not something that other people want me to make. So that brings me to chapter 3, how I chose my career. And I feel like I chose it based on logic and this Venn diagram of how to choose a career that circulates everywhere. And I don't really know the source for this Venn diagram, but I'm going to show you how I made my calculations. But okay, so this circle has what you love, this one has what you're good at, and then this one has what pays well. So an ideal career would have all 3 of these, or as close to 3 of these as possible. So up in what I love, I have stuff like art, coffee, and animals. Something that's just in what pays well, I feel like, is math, because I do not love it, nor am I good at it. But it pays well, I think. And then what I'm good at, I'm not really sure. I'm gonna do this last. So the overlap between what you love and what you're good at is happy but poor, by the words of this Venn diagram, not me. And then the overlap between what you love and what pays well is just a dream. And then the overlap between what you're good at and what pays well is rich but bored. And then so all 3 of these must overlap. And something I feel like is something that I'm good at is science, like a little bit. I'm not sure, but I'll just put it there anyways. The middle option is closest to being a veterinarian, because that has all 3: science, animals, and STEM. So that is the path that I chose. I'm a first-year veterinary student. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my career crisis. I had a career crisis this year, like early this year, and I'm going to unpack why. So the main cause of my career crisis was having a lack of high quality time to create art. And it's because vet school is so demanding that the composition of my days looked a lot like this right here. So most of it is spent at school, and then I get home and then I have to study for the next day, and with whatever time I have left, I use it on recovering from all of this. I really felt like my school work was taking over my entire life, and my creativity especially, and felt like they were in such conflict with each other. And this is a quote from Kafka. He says, "Writing and office cannot be reconciled, since writing has its center of gravity in depth, whereas the office is on the surface of life. So it goes up and down, and one is bound to be torn asunder in the process." And this is from Letters to Felice Bauer. And so I felt this constant lack of energy to do art, and I felt like it was hurting my soul, because that's something that I live for. Specifically, when Kafka says writing has its center of gravity in depth, in order to create art, you need to be bored with a clear mind so that you can reflect and have introspection. and dive deep into your soul to put out artwork that draws from your emotions. And I feel like this was very incompatible with school, because if I'm going through like 9 hours of grueling school and then studying this like intense material, I feel like I'm not gonna be going outside and staring at the trees and writing a poem about the way the leaves sway in the wind. And also, this is a quote from Austin Kleon. "The trick is to find a day job that pays decently, doesn't make you want to vomit, and leaves you with enough energy to make things in your spare time." And I fundamentally felt that I did not have enough energy to make things in my spare time. So I felt that what I was doing was very mismatched with my soul. Then the next reason for my career crisis is that I had this fear of wasted potential. What could I have created if I chose to spend all of my time just creating and focusing on building my creative skills? Like, how realistic would my paintings be by now if I had done that every single day? And it also makes me think of how many other works of art have been lost in time or just not created, that just fizzled out as ideas because creative people were just trying to survive through working a job that was taking all over their time and energy. And I feel like those ideas, if they were executed, have the ability to emotionally connect with so many people, but it just will never be created because these people are spending all of their time and energy on survival. So going hand in hand with fear of wasted potential is fear of not being good at anything. I feel like I'm scattering my attention between so many things, but I'm not truly being good at either. I have two analogies to properly capture this feeling. The first one is the fig tree analogy by Sylvia Plath, which I can read you an excerpt of. "I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor. And beyond and above these figs were so many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black. One by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet." And this drawing captures this playing out in my life because one of the figs is a veterinarian and one of the figs is being an artist, and I feel like I'm not actually picking either one of these but trying to decide between them but not fully having either. And the second analogy is Plato's theory of forms. This is the idea by Plato that the world is a shadow of the true reality, that is the world of the forms. So I felt that in this material world, there's me dividing my attention between going to vet school, trying to create, not really succeeding, trying to recover from vet school and doing all of these things. But there's a world of forms where I'm either the perfect veterinarian who doesn't care about art at all and just focuses on reading about the vet news in my spare time and going all in on that. And then there's also a perfect form of me being an artist, spending all my time creating so that I could be the best possible artist. And I felt that this material world just did not reflect the world of forms at all, because there's so many things that I could be, but since I'm not choosing either, I'm just mediocre at all of these things. So chapter 4 is how I resolved my career crisis so far. I realized that if there is a will to do something that you love, that you're passionate about, there will always be a way to figure that out, in my opinion. So an example I have is Franz Kafka and his routine for writing. And this is described in this quote in Letters to Felice Bauer. He says, "But what, dearest Felice, have you to say to the kind of married life in which the husband, at any rate for several months in the year, returns from the office at 2:30 or 3, eats, lies down, sleeps until 7 or 8, hurriedly takes his supper, takes an hour's walk, and then starts writing and writes till 1 or 2. Could you really stand that?" So he's talking about his schedule here to his fiancée Felice Bauer, and we can see that his schedule is very tight. Like, he comes back and then takes a quick nap, but then starts writing until like 1 or 2 a.m. And I feel like that's such dedication, but he wants to do something he's passionate. So even though he has this insurance job, he's still making his passion stay alive. And James Clear also talks about Kafka's schedule in this article titled "The Myth of Creative Inspiration." He writes, "Franz Kafka is considered one of the most creative and influential writers of the 20th century, but he actually spent most of his time working as a lawyer. How did Kafka produce such fantastic creative works while holding down his day job? By sticking to a strict schedule. The work of top creatives isn't dependent upon motivation or creative inspiration, but rather it follows a consistent pattern and routine. It's the mastering of daily habits that leads to success, not some mythical spark of creative inspiration." William James is noted for saying that habits and schedules are important because they free our minds to advance to really interesting fields of action. So instead of waiting for there to magically be time or creative inspiration, by scheduling out even the smallest amount of time per day, you're still making progress towards what you're passionate about, which is art. Even though it feels like I have no time at all, there is always a way around that and a way for me to keep my creativity alive. And the solution I found that really changed the trajectory of my career crisis is sewing. So I started sewing and embroidering, and I found that this is the perfect creative hobby to have under these conditions. This is the perfect hobby that I can have in school because I can do it while listening to the instructor's lecture. So it's like a repetitive task that requires me to be creative, but it's not something as involved as something like writing or painting, where I have to pretty much put 100% of my attention on that. So this is like the biggest solution that I found so far. So during class, I just sew my backpack. Like, let me show you what I've made so far. So this is my backpack, right? And I've just been embroidering and sewing stuff on it during class, just like during the lecture. And so I have all of these things that I've sewn during class. These are all just an accumulation of all of the lectures that I have. Like these, like this star has beads, which is really pretty. And I'm in the middle of embroidering a pomegranate. So I'm doing thread painting right now. I'm trying to learn how to thread paint. But also I've sewn this patch that says Miffy Cat, and it's just a cat that looks like Miffy. And this has cherries on it. And this pocket right here I sewed, and it's just big enough to fit my name tag perfectly. So I'm really happy that I have this new hobby because I feel like my creativity is staying alive, and this is a consistent way for me to be creative every day. So even though when I get home and I barely have any energy to create, I know that I have created that day because I'll have zone during the lecture. And also with larger creative projects such as this video, I can always get that done by allocating a specific part of my day to that task consistently. So this video was planned out over a very long period of time, but because I had that consistently, like even though it was, you know, a few minutes every week, I eventually made all of this for my video. And even Austin Kleon in Steal Like an Artist says, the solution is really simple. Figure out what time you can carve out, what time you can steal, and stick to your routine. Do the work every day, no matter what. No holidays, no sick days, don't stop. And the second way I resolved my career crisis was having an abundance mindset. And this is where I stopped seeing creativity as a finite resource and seeing it more as something that I have in abundance. And Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says an abundance mindset is the belief that there are enough resources and successes for everyone versus a scarcity mindset where life is a finite pie. One's successes do not take away from another. In this case, he's talking about successes and how other people's successes doesn't take away from yours. But if you replace that with creativity, that also works very well, where I felt that because I'm not creating as much as I would like to, my creativity is gonna run out because I'm not spending time on it. I just realized that's not true at all, and creativity is a renewable resource because you will always have that creativity inside you even though you're not spending all your time on it necessarily. And also I realized that artists produce their best work, or like they tend to produce their best work later on in life. And so I feel like I'm putting all of this pressure on myself to create everything right now, even though there's a whole life ahead of me where I can create stuff. There is this random article that I read that reads, Picasso died in 1973, aged 91. He was 36 when he painted his masterpiece showing the horrors of the Spanish Civil War. Monet, who died at his home at Giverny, Normandy at the age of 86, was 53 when he started work on the garden there. He was 60 when he painted what became his most valuable work, Bassin aux nymphéas et sentir au bord de l'eau, which sold in 1998. Artists who painted their most valuable work around the age of 42 include Edgar Degas, Salvador Dali, Edvard Munch, and Roy Lichtenstein. Francis found, however, that whether artists died young, they were found to produce their most valuable work about 2/3 of the way through their lifetime. So I have all of this time and all of this creativity that I will always have, but I'm limiting myself to what I do right now. And I realize that even if I can't commit a certain amount of energy on art right now, that doesn't mean it's gonna be like that forever. And I realized that I need to stop having a scarcity mindset where I'm like, oh, because I'm spending all of this energy on something else, my creativity will go away and never come back. That's just not true. 4.3 is combining medicine and art and seeing these two parts of my life as symbiotic. And I realized that medicine and art have so many overlaps. And I felt this way during our musculoskeletal class where we had to learn all of the bones and muscles and blood vessels of animals. I was so inspired by the different shapes and colors that are inside the dog body that I felt like it was such an artistic experience. And also Leonardo da Vinci used dissection of animals in order to inspire his art. So this quote reads, In 2 campaigns of research around 1490 and then between 1506 to 13, Leonardo investigated the nervous system, the internal organs, the bones and muscles, and structure and function of the heart and reproductive systems. Working in monastery hospitals and medical schools, he dissected perhaps 30 human corpses and many more animals, recording his findings in hundreds of detailed drawings. In the late 19th century, the anatomical drawings were finally published and the notes translated, and we can now understand Leonardo as one of the greatest anatomists ever to have lived. As a mere craftsman, the young Leonardo was not easily able to obtain human material for dissection. So at the start of his career, he dissected animals instead, including frogs, bears, dogs, and monkeys, according to the Royal Collection Trust. And so as an artist, you have to be a good anatomist, but also as a veterinarian, you need to be a good anatomist. And during our musculoskeletal class where we were dissecting dog cadavers every day, I really felt inspired. Throughout this whole class, I was like so happy learning about all of the different bones that are like shaped differently and interestingly, and what is art but not trying to look for things that are shaped in interesting ways and that have unique structures. So this is like my actual notebook during this class that I like sketched a lot in. This is, oh wait, I've scribbled all over, but these are all of the different scapulas that animals have. This is a cat scapula, while this is a dog scapula. And so I was just very inspired by all of these shapes. These are the pelvises of these animals. This is a dog skull. So yeah, and also medicine is very similar to art in a lot of ways because of its necessity to be emotionally deep, because you are dealing with human people who have emotions. And I think art also is a very emotional process where you're trying to unpack the emotions of the artist who created an artwork. To add on to that, I have just come into realization how abstract medicine actually is. And even though we are working off of something that is objective, something like science, the way that medicine works is that it still varies among doctors. For example, like what the doctor actually says when they are telling you information, what their medical plan is, and the variability of the clinical signs and what they interpret from that, and how they interpret diagnostics, that's still all variable. And yes, they do consult each other for the main goal of the patient feeling better, but I feel like a lot of things in medicine are still very abstract. And lastly, I realized that inspiration for art comes from everything in life. Artists create art based on their life experiences, so I'm still constantly having experiences while in veterinary school that I can use in my art as something that inspires my art. It's not like I'm not living life right now, you know what I mean? Like everything that happens to you is a source of inspiration for art that you can use in the future. So even though I'm in vet school, that's also a very unique experience that could influence the way I create things in the future. So yes, that is how I created a symbiotic relationship between medicine and art, the two aspects of my life currently. Lastly, how I overcame my career crisis is that I realized there's no such thing as a perfect career. Even if we go back to this Venn diagram where there's supposedly something in the middle that is like perfect, I don't think that that exists, because how do I know that I will be 100% satisfied with a different path, and what will that even look like? Like, will I be a graphic designer or something, but I'm not even sure if that will satisfy me because I've never been in that path. I've only been in the medicine path. And also, even if I had chosen something else, am I confident saying that I won't have any problems in that field ever? Like, I'm sure that if I was a full-time painter, I would get tired of something and have some kind of problem. So it's like, why am I thinking that there is a perfect career when there's problems in every field, and this is the optimal decision that I came to in this current life, you know? So instead of using passion as a metric for deciding a career, I want to use sustainability. So instead of being like, oh, like it's my life mission to do whatever job, I want it to be more so sustainable. Like, can I actually do this for 40 years consistently? And because there's so much diversity in the vet field, I feel confident that I will choose something in this field that will sustain me throughout all that, and as well as give me more flexibility in the future. Last chapter, limitations and conclusion. So first I'm going to start with the conclusions. Overall, I think that art has its flavor when it is born through some kind of friction getting there. And this is well captured by a quote by Camus, which reads, "If art insists on being a luxury, it will also be a lie." So I feel like the best art is born of some kind of struggle with the artist's internal world and the outside world. So I feel as though that it's very normal as an artist to feel as though there's some kind of barrier to it, and that's the reason why such great art is born through suffering. Even though I'm not suffering necessarily, there is still something that I'm overcoming. That's the reason why what I create is meaningful. Similarly, there's a quote by Tarkovsky from the movie Stalker, which reads, "May they laugh at their passions, for what they call passion is not really the energy of the soul, but merely the friction between the soul and the outside world." And I don't know what this quote means actually at all, but the best interpretation that I can think of after reading this multiple times is that passion always has some kind of friction between the person with the passion and the outside world. So just because there is passion doesn't mean it's going to perfectly show itself in the actual world, but there's always some kind of struggle that needs to be overcome in order for the passion to be actualized. So that's the friction between the soul and the outside world. The second conclusion that I came to is that the reason why I'm thinking about this so much and thinking about the best arrangement for my passion in conjunction with my career is the fact that I have freedom. This is a quote by Dostoevsky in The Brothers Karamazov. He writes, "Thou wouldst go into the world and art going with empty hands, with some promise of freedom which men in their simplicity and their unruliness cannot even understand, which they fear and dread, for nothing has ever been more insupportable for a man and a human society than freedom." And this quote demonstrates the anxieties that people face when they're presented with freedom. Even though this is a beautiful thing, with freedom comes great responsibility in order for you to arrange yourself in a perfect way. And overall, I feel that my spiral of thoughts is a direct result of the freedom that I have. Man is tormented by no greater anxiety than to find someone quickly to whom he can hand over that gift of freedom with which the ill-fated creature is born. So overall, I believe that the main source of this anxiety with deciding on things that go on in my life is the fact that I have freedom, but I do love freedom, but there are nuances to it. Limitations. First one is I'm not a veterinarian yet, clearly, so I'm just a student and I can speak in the perspective of a student, not someone who is in the workforce. And also, I don't really know what my life will look like in the future at all. And this is how I feel right now, and I'm still developing my thoughts on this matter, but maybe I can update you guys when I become a veterinarian. So yeah, that's all of the video. Okay, bye.